For some reason there were just a few Americans that hung at the edge of the crowd that made the hair stand up on the back of his neck. When he first began to have that funny feeling about some of them, he really hoped that it was just his imagination. Maybe he was wrong and it was just the stress of all they had been through. There had to be an explanation for what he thought he was seeing. It wasn't anything in particular he could put his finger on. The two he focused on acted just like the others down here. Quite industrious, going about the same duties of construction and maintenance as their companions. But there was just something about them that wasn't quite right, a difference in the way they moved, a slight shuffling gait that became more pronounced as the days went by. Eyes dull and flat, their skin seemed just a shade lighter than those around them. They hadn't been hiding underground long enough to have become as pale as the two men he was looking at now. All interaction they had with their fellow refugees seemed forced and distant, as if they knew how they were supposed to act with them but were unused to doing it. Stiff smiles, reactions just a second or two slower than the situation called for were evident in the few he had zoned in on. He watched one of the men in question drop a tool on the floor and stare at it for a minute before bending down like a stick figure to grasp at the object in hands that he didn't seem to know how to make work. Fumbling around with thick fingers, the man finally managed to grab the hammer and curl them close to get it off the ground. Franklin's mind was going through all the possibilities as he continued to look through the crowd, trying to see exactly how many Americans were acting or looking like the males he was focusing on. In addition to the two he had been watching, there were two more on the opposite side of the room moving about with a slightly confused look on their faces, standing next to men and women that looked and acted perfectly normal. He had watched them for days after he first got the feeling they were different. They continued to mingle, though their jerking movements became more pronounced with each day that passed, and their actions were greeted with tender concern by their companions. Commenting on how hard this whole experience had been on all, the people here did what they always had, worked harder to fill in for their strange acting companions until they could get better. But the differences were becoming more noticeable, and it was causing a bit of discomfort to those that were trying to help them. A slight grimace when they spoke to them, hesitant suggestions that they might want to go to Charlie for some healing for whatever had begun to ail them, but still they were secure in the fact that whatever was going on could be fixed. The people in question, as if sensing they were becoming more noticeable, would then move toward a different section of the caves and attempt to mix in with another group. With each move, they adapted their behavior just a bit to blend with the others. They were aping others' actions to fit in. Franklin glanced at Vincent, who was staring at the same men with a troubled look on his face, nodding in his direction to indicate he had seen the odd behavior too. Both men then looked toward Charlie for confirmation that something was amiss. The little purple-haired guy had a frown on his face as if something was going on that he didn't quite understand, and this made Franklin very uncomfortable because in the short time that he had known Charlie, the Saran, knower of all mysterious things, didn't not know much about what was happening. It was apparent by the suddenly sick look on the Saran's face that he was seeing the little things that Franklin and Vincent had been seeing, and the significance of it had begun to sink in.